So I think it goes without saying that prior to COVID-19, for many of us, working life was about going into the office pretty much 5 days a week. We occasionally worked from home, but mostly we were in the office. And now we find ourselves working in entirely new ways. We've all had to get to grips with Zoom and Microsoft Teams. It feels like second nature now, although I can still struggle over how to share sound, I will say that. But beyond that, I think we've pretty much mastered that way of working, and new buzzwords and things like can you unmute yourself have become everyday expressions that we use. And you may recall that prior to COVID, radio has always played a very important role in the workplace. People have had it on in the background to complete their daily tasks. But since COVID came in, I think many of us have developed a much more intimate relationship with radio and presenters for many of the reasons that we would know, like the fact it gives you company, and the serendipity of hearing a song you haven't heard, or a piece of information or a story, that the sort of things that you picked up in the kitchen at work when you were chatting to a colleague that you perhaps didn't always work with. So it opens your horizons to other things. And actually, when we looked at the working from home audience in previous studies, they came out as much higher of the increase of listening than other audiences. So 40% of commercial radio listeners were listening for over 2 hours extra a day. So this new piece of research, we took a much closer look at this audience. So new ways of working, new ways of connecting is about helping brands form meaningful relationships with a working from home world. And there are lots of us doing it. On the 5th of February, the Office for National Statistics reported that almost half of all working adults, so that's 46% of us, are currently working from home, either full-time or part-time because of COVID. But who are these people who are working from home? Let's have a look. Are they of value to advertisers? Are they responsive to advertising? And if they can, and if they are, how can brands reach this audience? So we commissioned an agency called DRG. We have done 4 previous pieces of listening studies with them, and they went into field with this one at the end of January, beginning of February. So they discovered that the working from home audience tends to be ages 25 to 54. So 83% of the working from home audience are in that age category. They also work across a range of industries, with over 50% are found in IT, education, finance, health and social care, and local and national governments. Where they are, it does reflect the fact of these kind of industries they are, because the service industries are very concentrated in London and South East, and that is where the highest proportion are. But it doesn't mean that they're not dotted all around the country, because they are. They tend to be ABC1, with 84% of them forming this group. And home ownership is very high in this group, with nearly 2/3 of them owning their own homes, as well as 23% of them owning their property outright. And they have high incomes. The working from home audience has a household income of 45% greater than the national average. So just to recap what we know about this audience: they're young, they tend to be service industry based, because I suppose it's much easier to pick up your work life and bring it home that way. They tend to be management, professional, sort of clerical roles. They're high ABC1s, high home ownership with high household incomes. So I think you'll agree this is a pretty attractive audience segment for advertisers. So how can brands connect with this group of people who, by definition, are no longer able to get out and about as much as they used to? Well, one way you can connect with those working from home, and I'm going to say this, is radio. So I'm going to hand over to Camilla, who's going to explore this a little bit further.
Hello, I'm Camilla Kamara, and I'm the Insight Manager at Radio Centre. As we've already shown, the working from home audience is a valuable group. But did you know that 56% of them are commercial radio listeners? This presents a great opportunity to connect with an extremely valuable audience. Now, let's explore this audience of commercial radio listeners who work from home in more detail. What we can see is that new listening habits have been established. In a listener survey we conducted in April 2020, we found that 45% of commercial radio listeners who work from home were listening to more radio than they were before the COVID-19 pandemic. This is now 50%. This suggests that there was a strong shift towards increased listening as we changed the ways that we consumed our media, and that these new radio listening habits have become entrenched into our lives. And it's easy to see why this audience of people working from home full-time is listening to more radio when you explore the reasons behind it. The most obvious reason for the working from home group listening to more radio is simply that they have more time and opportunity than they had before lockdown. Other reasons include news updates, especially local ones, which of course are important at a time where COVID developments can be really localised. Radio also acts as a mood enhancer, and at a time where levels of social isolation are high, radio provides company too. But the big benefit that radio has is that it can be listened to while people are working. In fact, it is. 89% of commercial radio listeners working from home say so. This suggests that commercial radio listeners who work from home are listening to the radio during the daytime, at times of day that they may have been unlikely to listen previously. So this is great news for radio, but what are the implications for advertisers? Well, the good news is this is an audience receptive to advertising. Over half of them agree that when they hear something advertised on the radio, they'll often look it up online, providing a huge opportunity to engage with this previously difficult to reach audience. The COVID-19 pandemic has had an impact on savings too. 63% of this group have saved money since the pandemic began. So not only is this group likely to have a higher household income than the national average, but many of them have been saving money as well. So they have money in their pockets, it's burning a hole, and while the range of spending opportunities at out-of-home outlets have been reduced, those working from home have satisfied their urges by getting home deliveries instead. They're spending their money on a wide range of home deliveries. Takeaways and groceries top the list, with over 40% spending money on these purchases, but they range from food and necessities such as pet food and fruit and veg, to indulgences such as cheese boxes and alcohol. As well as online shopping, there's been a move towards more localised shopping too. In one of our previous studies, we found that the working from home group was the group most likely to have increased spend in their local areas. And this is perhaps unsurprising given the extra time they were spending at home and in their local areas versus pre-lockdown. We found the same to be true in this study, with a new appreciation of the importance of what's close to home, and with this group citing an urge to return to their local high streets and a move towards supporting local businesses too. So we know that this group is comparatively well off. We know many of them have saved money during the pandemic. But what do we think will happen once all of the COVID restrictions have been lifted? Well, the chief economist at the Bank of England is optimistic. He expects the turn in sentiment, spending, and the economy to be rapid, and he expects this for two reasons. Firstly, he thinks that households have strengthened their incomes due to forced restrictions on their spending. We haven't been able to get out and spend our money on the things that we usually would. Secondly, having been stuck indoors for a year, most people are desperate to get on with their lives, including their social lives. When given the opportunity to do so safely, he thinks they'll seize it, and this is exactly what we see in this research. Indeed, back in May 2020, we asked commercial radio listeners who work from home to tell us what they intended to increase their spend on upon the initial lockdown relaxation that very month. What we found when we compare the data from 2020 to our most recent study is that commercial radio listeners who work from home are itching to spend their money, with much higher projected spend increases versus what we saw back in May 2020. What was interesting was the move towards increasing spending activities and travel versus what we saw last year. The work from home group want their social lives back, and they're willing to increase their spend. The pandemic has given us time to reflect on life priorities too. Not only are working from home listeners reflecting on their work-life balance, but many of them are planning significant life events as well. Looking more closely at these life events, they range from holidays to moving house to having another child. Over half of this group intend on going on a big holiday within 6 months of lockdown restrictions being lifted. Making major home improvements and buying a new car score highly on that list too, and this is another great opportunity for advertisers. So that's it from me. Now I'll hand over to Lucy to look to the future.
And so what of the future? Will we all return to the office 5 days a week? Our research suggests not. Those from working from home at the moment have definitely recalibrated their thinking, and our research suggests that working from home is much more likely to become commonplace amongst this comparatively well-off group of workers. It will have huge implications, of course, for employers, but also for advertisers and brands and companies that service people from their offices. So already we have seen companies like Pret, who have always served an the inner city commuter workers, have started opening up in more residential areas. So perhaps they've seen the opportunity there with the working from home audience. And indeed, some of the new advertisers that we've welcomed to radio in the last year, including a lot of home fitness brands, have also established that many people working from home are an attractive audience. And I hope that this research shows a sort of clear path to this newly emerging category, which of course is via radio. And this is a way for brands to connect with this new working from home audience. So just to kind of finish off, just as a reminder, the working from home audience is extremely valuable. They have household incomes above the national average and have a significant proportion of savings that they are keen to spend. The working from home listeners continue to listen to more radio than they had before lockdown, and these listeners are really receptive to advertising. Radio plays a complementary role to the working day, providing something to have on in the background and companionship at a time when isolation is really high. And again, this provides an opportunity to for advertisers to form meaningful connections. And actually, just as a reminder, the final reminder is new working from home habits have been formed, and 61% will seek to continue working from home in one form or another post the pandemic. The new way of working is here to stay. Thank you.